very much. Yep, I'm the head of digital education at UCL. Actually, I joined UCL in 2000, so this is, I'm nearly 16 years in. They say once you go past 5 years, you never escape, and maybe I'm going to be an example of that. My talk, a bit like Jenny, it's looking back at really over the last 10 years, the period in which we've been involved in Moodle at UCL. Similarly, it's retrospective. But unlike the OU, we have really been consumers rather than producers of Moodle. And so my focus is more on the sort of the strategy and the approach to engaging our academic community in using e-learning. And the totality to connectivity bit is just really, I'm going to be talking about how, first of all, we did the blanket bombing and got Moodle everywhere, so Moodle into every module on every programme, and how we're now moving from and we did that really in a not very strategic way, more by trial and error, an ad hoc approach. But then we took a more strategic approach, and we now have a new strategy and a new move towards more connected modes of learning. So I'm going to go back to about 2007, when we first became a Moodle institution, and bring us right up to the present day. But first of all, a bit of context. UCL, I hear the comedian last night, I missed the dinner, but I hear the comedian last night was a bit rude about UCL. We're not a poly, we're actually quite a good university. We're very research intensive, and that has been the institutional sort of identity. It's been a research-led institution. But that is beginning to shift in a very positive way. We're campus-based in that, if you can call a sort of scattering of buildings of varying ages across Bloomsbury and Hampstead and Highgate, and also stretching down to Surrey, a campus. But by campus-based, I mean that we're mainly a face-to-face institution. We were more heavily undergraduate until about a year ago when we merged with the Institute of Education. Of course, they have a lot of postgraduate certificate of education programs. And so we now have pretty much equal numbers of undergraduate and postgraduate. And we've always had a pretty traditional approach to education at UCL. And the staff and students really value that sort of face-to-face experience. So blended learning is as good as it gets, and there's very little fully online learning. I wanted to just, I added in these slides last night, which is partly why I didn't come to the dinner. I just thought it was worth drawing a timeline, first of all, of the way that the team that I work in has evolved. And actually, this is just a mugshot of some of them who are here. There were 9 of us here yesterday, which was probably a record for MoodleMoot, and indeed for us to send any people to a conference. So that's some of them in the hall yesterday. The team started in 2002, when we were given responsibility for WebCT. And we called ourselves the Learning Technology Support Service, and it started off with me as a kind of caretaker manager and 2 learning technologists. And it grew up until about 2008 to 8 staff. 2012, we had a big reorganisation, and amazingly, money was given to our area. So we were able to grow the team. So we pretty much doubled to 15 staff, and we rebranded as e-learning environments. And at that point, we took on responsibility not just for e-learning, but also for learning spaces. And this year, we rebranded again to digital education. I've managed to resist the technology-enhanced learning in the title. I hate that. But e-learning began to sound a bit dated. We felt digital education sounded a little bit more current, although I'm told it's actually digital is past, you know. The other timeline I wanted to touch on was our strategic timeline. And certainly when I started in 2000 and began to be involved in e-learning in 2002, there was nothing like an e-learning strategy. In 2005, I was invited to develop a thing called an e-learning strategic statement. And this was an annex onto our education strategy. But it wasn't really a strategy. Then, 2012, I was asked to produce an e-learning strategy, and I will talk about the development process there and what we did and what we achieved and what we didn't. And now we've got our new education strategy. It's just been released, and e-learning is properly embedded into it. Now, when Martin was talking yesterday about roles, it made me reflect on my own roles in this area. So I've now got my sort of personal timeline. And certainly in 2002, when I was kind of given WebCT without particularly asking for it, I was a rookie learning technologist. And I was also running an IT training team at the same time, so I was not terribly hands-on. 2008, I had been on maternity leave. I came back, and most of the team disappeared. I'm not sure if it was something to do with me coming back. But at that point, I had to really become Mrs. Moodle, because I had virtually nobody left, and I had to do the whole thing, end-to-end support for Moodle. So I certainly became deeply immersed in Moodle. By 2012, when we were developing that strategy, I'd say I was moving from a management role and more into a leadership role, which is what one should try and aspire to, I gather. And when we were invited to choose our tables for dinner, I was looking at the different categories, thinking, where should I go? I thought, oh, probably decision maker. So this is just sort of prompted by Martin's talk yesterday. Anyway, on to the meat of the presentation. The first part of our journey to total Moodle. And in case you're wondering why I've got a picture of an eclipse, when you have a full solar eclipse, it's called Totality. Back in 2007, we were a WebCT institution, and we were having a fairly rocky time with WebCT. Their support seemed to be getting worse and worse, their prices were going up, and they were going to land us with Vista, which was the next version, and it would have required every course to have been redone. So this really prompted us to stop and think, well, you know, actually, is this the right platform for us? So we did a VLE review, and we asked staff and students what they wanted, and actually, of course, I think somebody said this yesterday, you don't know what you don't know, and if you haven't done it in a VLE, then you probably don't know that it's possible. And so students and staff alike were pretty much telling us that they wanted the same functionality that WebCT had. There didn't seem to be much vision. We weren't getting much of a steer. We did the beauty contest. So we looked at, then the contenders really were Blackboard, Moodle, and WebCT Vista. And it was really hard to, none of them seemed to come out particularly in front of the others, which was difficult, but actually gave us the opportunity to stick our necks out and say, well, actually, we think, based on what we know about Moodle, that this is the way forward. And we didn't have that many courses to migrate. So there were, a few hundred courses. It wasn't a big job to change direction. And so my final thing, pretty much, as I went on maternity leave to have my daughter in 2007, was that, my view, my advice to the institution was that we should go with Moodle. And the final decision was taken pretty much on the day that my daughter was born, at which point I became a mum and not a learning technologist and not remotely interested in what was going on at UCL. And that period, that honeymoon period, lasted about 9 months. After that, I began to think about coming back to work. I came back a year later. And that coincided with the migration. So we'd made the decision, but we needed to get everything lined up. We needed to get Moodle installed. We needed to recruit staff to run it. And we had a big project, a big Moodle migration project. Now, of course, if we were to change VLE now, it would be a much bigger project, but it seemed big enough to us at the time. We engaged students, the M team, to help us to move content over. And it all seemed to go quite well. But we were really only scratching the surface of the number of modules that existed. In 2005, before I went off, I had been asked to write this e-learning strategic statement. And to be honest, there wasn't very much of great consequence in it. There were some nice words, but it didn't really have any meat. Apart from there was one thing, which was that every course should have an e-learning presence by September 2011. So that was the one sort of solid thing in that strategy. And so, it was a diktat. And UCL is not it is not an authoritarian institution. It's actually very democratic. And and rather lawless in some ways. So we were slightly bothered about this, but we developed a thing called the Moodle baseline, or the minimum requirements, to try and make it easier for academics to know what they needed to do. And so we had this Moodle baseline, and I think that my colleagues Jess Gramp and Clive Young have spoken about this at MoodleMoot in the past. It was a short list, a checklist of things that you ought to have in a course. The obvious stuff, your notes, news forum, timetable, links to resources and so on. Strangely, a glossary. I'm not sure why we felt that was so important. And this went out, there was an email, I remember, it went out from the Vice Provost for Education. And he said, you know, we need to do this, and you've got to do it by September 2011. And if you have any problems, go and talk to the LTSS, the Learning Technology Support Service. So we were braced for a backlash. We actually prepared an email to respond to people to say, well, it's all, you know, it's all for the greater good, and it'll improve the student learning experience, and it'll make your teaching better, and it'll help you to organise your resources. And so we had this email ready to go out to all the people who were going to be screaming at us. And there was no backlash. And we were really surprised. We just couldn't understand why it was just nothing. And I know that Jess and Clive have talked about this, so I'll go through this bit fairly quickly. But I think it's interesting to reflect on why we didn't have that backlash. What did we get right? Well, first of all, I think it was having that top-down support from the Vice Provost for Learning and Teaching. There was an institutional backing, and it was in the strategy. But we supported it. We you know, kind of learning by doing, thought about, well, what can we do to make life easier? So we knitted some of the key systems together. We have Moodle there, but we also connected it with Turnitin, with our online reading list service, with timetables, with Echo 360 for our lecturecast service. We provided templates to course teams, and we offered to tailor them for departments if they wanted. We had always had courses. We aligned our courses with the baseline. So we were able to say to people, well, look, if you want to get a course up to baseline standard, then come on our 3-hour session, and you will walk out with a course which is ready to go. We targeted new staff, get them while they're green and enthusiastic. But thinking about the Rogers adoption curve, which Michael Dirac was talking about yesterday, we also targeted the late adopters. We wanted to ensure that there were no nasty surprises for them. So we prepared the ground, we contacted them, we encouraged them, we emphasised the student experience, we tried to speak their language, we did some homework to find out what motivated people. And we just tried to make sure we were as clued up and able to think from their perspective as possible. But we had also noticed that when we ran training courses, we always aimed them at academics, but we often found that administrators came. And they're thinking, oh, come on, why are you coming? You need your academic colleagues to come. We want to talk to the academics. But then we realised, actually, the administrators are tremendously influential. And so we built an alliance with departmental administrators who then helped with the adoption of Moodle in their areas. So the teaching administrators, we ran courses specifically for them, rather than say, well, you know, you really come on a course which is for an academic. We tailored the courses for them. And I don't know if you've got them in your institutions, but in our at UCL, most departments have got teaching administrators. And I'm not expecting you to read this. This is a list of the tools and services that they need to have expertise, or at least good working knowledge of. So there are 40 plus tools. And the thing is that the administrators are expected to know all this stuff, and it's almost impossible for academics to keep up with this kind of thing. So the administrators are actually points of authority. They're very influential in their departments. And we used them. They were really powerful allies, and they helped to oversee the migration of content from websites and from documents and from a miscellany of spaces, bringing it into Moodle in a more consistent way. So there was the institutional backing. There was the support that we gave and planned. There was the partnership with the departmental administrators. And there was also the student voice. And we had surveyed students about what they liked best and what they liked least in terms of IT. And this is just a wordle of the text comments, and you can see that Moodle comes out very positively. So this was wonderful. But there's always a catch. And in fact, when you looked at some of the comments, and I don't know how well you can see this, but basically this is students telling us they want better consistency, that if they're seeing Moodle being used well by one individual or in one department, then they want it to be equally good in other departments and from other staff. So we knew that we hadn't really done enough. We then decided to divvy up the 70-odd teaching departments in the institution amongst the team. And so we were a team of about 8 at that time. So we had maybe 10 departments each. And we needed to go and look at what modules were still left to bring into Moodle, and also where they had just put in courses with the absolute minimum, what we could do to improve them. So we did a departmental push, and we offered Moodle makeovers. And we did get there. We achieved total Moodle. Now, I guess what's difficult to know is the quality that was in those courses. And there are, thousands of modules now in Moodle, and it's very difficult to get a feel for the overall quality. I was very interested in the MMU approach that we heard about yesterday, where they have a tool, a sort of audit tool, to count the different sorts of activities and things in modules, and gives you the traffic light, red, amber, green sort of quality scores. So I think we'll be looking at whether we can start to use that. But what I've just covered is really getting to totality, how we did the blanket bombing of Moodle. The second part of my story is about having to be more strategic and learning the lessons from what had gone before. So back in 2011, we didn't have a very clear education strategy. We did have a thing called the Learning and Teaching Strategy, but it was ghastly, it was tremendously long, and you really there was certainly no way you could come up with an elevator pitch from it. It was really difficult to get the gist of it. And so to me that felt a bit like a strategy vacuum, and I was asked to develop an e-learning strategy to take us forward just 3 years, 2012 through to 2015. So this was a lovely challenge. I remember the first attempt I made at it, and I kind of did something slightly in isolation. I showed it to my director. I was pretty pleased with it, and he said, well, it's nice, but really, where's the vision? And it's not really a strategy. And I thought, oh God, spent hours and hours trying to bring it together. So I stopped and thought and did, first of all, some horizon scanning, went back, looked at what was going on in the literature and what the keynotes, themes in conferences were and what the discussions and things on social media were. We did, as you would always do when you're developing a strategy, look at what your competitors are doing, so a bit of surveillance. I was also a student on a distance learning master's in digital education at the University of Edinburgh. And fortuitously, there was a module there called E-Learning Strategy and Policy. So I decided that for my assignment for that, I would develop an e-learning strategy as part of that assignment, get guidance from Jeff Hayward at Edinburgh, who was one of the guys who really led the development of MOOCs at Edinburgh. He's a fantastic academic, very practical, and he was my tutor on this module, so it really couldn't have been better in terms of mentoring. I had also done a leadership course, a leadership program run by the Leadership Foundation, and there was it was a program over a year, and there were different modules, and one of the modules we did was on strategy. So I had a good library of books on strategic development. One of the nicest ones is the Garrett and Davis one on herding cats. It's very short, and it's full of pictures and nice quotes about leadership in education institutions. And a quote that I really like is that the leader's role is to describe reality and to give hope. And one of the other influential people on leadership and strategy is John Cotter. If you have a look at the Harvard Business Review, I think it's from 2006, John Cotter talks about creating a sense of urgency and gathering together a powerful guiding coalition to help you to drive change. So we did all this background work, but of course we needed to know what staff and students thought. So, and again, just as we had found back in 2007 when we were doing the VLE review, people tended to want more of the same. And we really wanted something a bit more visionary and a bit more inspiring. So we invited students to enter a digital story competition. And they were told to create a digital story, 3 to 4 minutes long, presenting their vision of education in the future. So this is where the technology is probably going to fail me, but we'll see how we go. Because I'm going to show one of the videos now, and I'm going to show another one a bit later on. And this one is from a pair of physics students, Alex Dutton and Amy, I've forgotten her name. And it's a bit shaky cam at first, but it will calm down. So if you begin to feel nauseous, then don't worry. Hopefully the sound will work.
Trying to predict the face of higher education in the near future is a difficult task. And while it is unlikely that our esteemed geneticists will have found a way to revive Jeremy Bentham, finally reuniting UCL's favourite philosopher with his head, there are myriad ways in which our university could change in the next 10 years. Here, we consider some possibilities, from simple practicalities to a much greater picture. Welcome to the University College London of the future. Central to the learning of many students is access to books, journals, dictionaries, reference catalogues, anthologies, novels, etc., etc. Imagine then the future of UCL's libraries, completely digitised. No more searching in vain for that elusive book that someone else has already taken out. Easy access to all of UCL's written resources on one personal device. In 10 years, many more students will be bringing their laptops to lectures for clutter-free and crumple-proof note-taking. More laptops means more plugs, which means we'll need more plug sockets. And while we're at it, how about more cluster rooms? Queues for computers are crazy silly at UCL come exam time, and it's no secret that when they're queuing, students aren't working. In 10 years' time, the traditional lecture might be delivered by means of video conferencing. Everyone tunes in from the comfort of home. The dreaded 9 a.m. can now be conducted in bed with a cup of tea. Not that we're discouraging you from early starts or anything, I mean, it's just an idea. While such changes to UCL might be convenient and advantageous, we'd hate for the future of our great university to be lost in a cold web of technological advancement. So let's also consider some more people-orientated changes for the future. Firstly, we'd like to see an expansion of UCL's public outreach. The well-established lunch hour lecture is already held twice a week and released online, so more of this in 10 years' time please, but increased publicising and advertising to widen our audience. Imagine hordes of the public turning up on campus or tuning in online. Let's educate everybody. For some, it's easy to lose sight of where your studies might take you. So for each degree programme, what about regular timetabled seminars held by professionals in your field of study? Increasing contact between students, academics and research staff would not only create a tighter community, but also act as a source of continuing inspiration for students. Finally, let's consider cross-disciplinary interaction. Greater emphasis on knowledge and skill sharing with a focus on more lectures and workshops for students that are run by students. Our future for UCL is a holistic one, an all-encompassing education system that utilises technology effectively, considers greater interdepartmental exchange, and focuses on the relationship between staff and students. Due in part to technological advancements, we hope that scope for communication with the public, with other establishments, and within the university itself will allow this institution to continue inspiring pride in the words UCL, London's Global University.
So, hopefully I can go back to my presentation. Yes. So, now remember, this was done in 2011-12, and so this was before MOOCs had really hit the headlines. But it seems to me that those students were talking about MOOCs. They're talking about educating beyond the bounds of the institution, educating everyone. And they were talking about changing the relationships between students and staff and putting students in touch with researchers. And they were talking about cross-disciplinary interactions. So we thought this was powerful stuff. And another story that I'll tell you later will build on some of this. So this helped to inform our strategic aim. So we had this e-learning strategy. It was a standalone strategy, and it was, to me, in my view, a better strategy than the institutional learning and teaching strategy at that time. And it had a number of strategic aims, and I've slightly combined and remixed them here for this audience. But in essence, the first one was to raise our profile as an educational leader. We were a research leading institution, but we really wanted to try and use technology to help to raise our profile, to educate beyond the bounds of the institution, and to do more and better with technology. The second one was concerned with quality enhancement, to do better things and to do more engaging things using technology, and in particular to build on the e-learning, the Moodle baseline. The third one was to improve the interactions and the connections between our different digital components of our e-learning infrastructure. And to make it more seamless. We didn't have, and we still don't have, a portal, and there's, a lot of people get very cross about having to log in and log out and shift from one thing to the other, and very different interfaces and duplication of information in different places. And the fourth was to do with connecting students and academics and ideas, and inspired by what was going on here in the digital story. So it's all very well to have your aims. You then need to work out, well, what are the things that I'm going to have in place to achieve those aims? And what are the objectives that are going to take me there? And we ended up with a list of something like 45 objectives in 7 different sections. But there were a couple of things which we identified as being critical to success. And one of them was something that I came upon when I was doing my research for my master's course. And this was to take a participatory approach to change, to rolling out change. So Rose Luckin from the Institute of Education and Rona Sharp had both written on this in the context of e-learning, about how if you can give some power and some autonomy to departments or to teams, they're more likely to engage and to make things. And it's obvious, isn't it? If you're involved in making decisions and deciding how to do stuff, you're more likely to do it than if somebody tells you to do it. It's psychology, I guess. And so I was trying to think about how we could actually make this participatory approach work. And it seemed to me that to have a network of champions was the way forward. So we established the UCL e-learning champions network. And for every teaching department, we had one academic and one administrator. And generally, I think, for this sort of thing, you would typically have an academic e-learning champion or teaching and learning champion or coordinator. But we felt that we knew that the administrators were so influential and could really make such a difference and could help to move their departments along, that by pairing them up, we would get somewhere. And so we wrote to every head of department and we asked them to nominate or to seek volunteers for a pair of people to take on this role. And almost every head of department was very happy to do this and to offer people, and generally people were happy to do it. I only remember 1 or 2 people really pushing back and saying, we haven't got time for this and everybody's too busy and we can't do it. And the idea was that they would develop local strategic statements So they would be thinking about what are the needs in their discipline, and what are the things they want to prioritise, whether it's media-based education or e-assessment. What are the things that they really want to focus on? That they might be able to share good practice within their departments, but also to network with other champions in other departments. And ultimately, we were hoping to have broad, maybe faculty or even school-wide networks of champions and maybe special interest groups. So that was the first enabler. And when I looked at the individual aims and the objectives, this seemed to be something that was going to have influence across a whole range of aspects of the strategy. The other thing was the structure of our team. So until 2012, we had a very regular e-learning support team in which we had a lot of learning technologies, all of whom did everything. We were all generalists. We all covered everything from doing the service desk support and writing courses and delivering courses and doing one-to-one and working on projects and exploring new technologies and trying to evaluate. So we were all doing everything. We didn't have anybody facing out to the schools, though. Now, UCL had at that time 3 very large schools made up of 3 or 4 faculties each. And we were reorganised in 2012, and we had the opportunity to pretty much double the team in size. So I was trying to think about what's the best way to make use of this wonderful manna from heaven. And it seemed to me that what we needed was to have spokes, to have advisors facing out into those schools, to act as a focus, as liaison points for the champions, and also just to work at a more strategic level with departments and faculties. So we retained the core services that any e-learning team is going to have. So we've got the service desk support and the training and the one-to-one support and the advice, but we have the school-facing advisors as well. And we also set up a team which we were kind of hoping might be our kind of skunk works team, the innovation and evaluation team, the futures team, to do more horizon scanning, to look at innovations, to look at technical innovations, but also pedagogic innovations, and then to evaluate them, to work on projects. And so we had a new structure which we really did feel was going to work well, and it's working in partnership and in synergy with the champions. So those were the 2 main enablers for the strategy. Now, it was a strategy to take us from 2012 to 2015, and it was signed off by Education Committee on the 5th of December 2012. I remember that date quite well. So it was pretty much not really ready for 2012, but never mind. How did we do? No, we've got through 2015 now, so let's look back and see what we achieved. Well, in terms of raising our profile as an educational leader, yeah, we have made some progress there. One of the main things that we wanted to do, and actually, sorry, one of the things I should have said was that the reason I think this education strategy was palatable to our senior team was because of MOOCs, actually. For the first time ever, I was asked to go to the senior management team and talk to the provost and all the deans about the strategy, because they suddenly realised that, the big boys on the other side of the Atlantic were doing this MOOC thing, and, there was this fear of missing out. So this was an area that we had some institutional interest in. But we decided to take a slightly different approach, and what we did was we wanted to set up a public-facing VLE to support non-credit-bearing activities, whether it's CPD or executive education or sort of lifelong learning type of activities, or indeed support for learning communities of other sorts. So we wanted a platform for this, so a bit like doing the VLE review, except this time we didn't try and do it all ourselves. We ran a beauty contest, and there were many more contestants this time. And we engaged the services of EPIC, who are now Leo, to help us to go through all of the possible platforms that we might use. And there were 158, oh my God, I'm so glad we didn't do this ourselves, 158 platforms to look at. 23 met some critical criteria, 8 made it to our shortlist, and there were 3 finalists. The finalists were D2L, a platform called Topics, which was a kind of social media for learning platform, and Moodle. Now, Topics looked quite interesting, but it didn't have the kind of the financial stability behind it. D2L, to us, didn't look particularly different from Moodle. So it was actually, pretty clear to us the way that we needed to go was to have a public-facing, an external-facing Moodle. We didn't call it Moodle. We called it UCL Extend with a big X, which I kind of regret now, but I guess we were a bit we were a bit influenced by edX. But it's our public-facing Moodle, and it has a slightly different look and feel. People, quite often people look at it and say, oh, it's really nice. I wish Moodle was like this. Well, actually, it is Moodle. What it's got on top of what the main Moodle has is the shopping cart and the ability to browse and search for courses and to self-register and to pay online using a credit card and to do all this without having to have a UCL user ID. So we've got the course discovery side of it, the registration and payment, and the underlying learning environment. So we use a system called Course Merchant for the registration and payment thing, although that hasn't been without pain. But the underlying system is Moodle. It's hosted by Leo. They've been great people to work with, and it's gone very well. It's got, or has had, 118 courses over the 3 years since it went live. 17,000 learners, which is quite good. When we had the vision for this, of course, we were thinking very much in terms of revenue generation. This is a way to bring in money for CPD. And of course, we were completely kicked into the long grass by the emergence of MOOCs, because then, the world realised that you could do really good online learning without having to pay anything. So why would you pay UCL to do it if you can get it from Harvard for free? So it hasn't been the earner that we thought it might be, but then I guess that's just the way that the sector has gone. What we are finding is it's been a good place to disseminate research. We've also signed up with FutureLearn. This is another area that we dithered actually over for 2 years, and it was really only through the merger with the Institute of Education and having Diana Laurillard there, who was really very keen to do MOOCs and to work with FutureLearn. I think she could see its sort of educational potential, that she managed to persuade the senior team that this was the platform and the partner for us. So we've got 3 FutureLearn MOOCs either in action or just about to go live. One of them's been very big and very successful already. It's the Anthropology of Social Media. I think it's in week 4 at the moment. Very interesting course. One of them is on dementia, and the other one is on making babies in the 21st century. And the interesting thing about those is that they are led very much by researchers, people who would identify themselves as researchers rather than as teachers. And they are using it to disseminate their research impact. So although, MOOCs, there are many different reasons for MOOCing, in fact, UCL seems to be working well as a mechanism to show off our research. So that's where we've got to. I say it's gone quite well in terms of our sort of outreach related e-learning activity. The quality enhancement side, the building on the baseline, well, this has been good as well. And I think thanks very, largely to the efforts of Clive Young, who runs our spoke team, the advisory team, and Jess Gramp, who's going to be speaking later on this morning, and Tim Neumann from the Institute of Education. We've worked in partnership with the champions to review the baseline and to build on it. So now we have got a baseline and a baseline plus, The baseline has got much more detail and much more guidance on what you need to think about when you're trying to put together high quality materials online. There's a bit.ly there if you want to take a look at it, or you can just Google UCL e-learning baseline. It's in our wiki at the moment. We're going to do a nice sort of PDF printable version of it. And the IOE had something similar, and we had to kind of cut and shunt the two together, and that's come out with something which I think is better than the sum of the parts. We've got two baselines. One of them is for face-to-face programs, and the other one is for fully online programs where you need to provide much more in terms of orientation and support to students. How did we get on with the seamless digital infrastructure? Yeah, well, okay, this is quite tricky. And don't ask me any details. I'm not a technical person. I may have been Mrs. Moodle in the past, but I'm definitely not anymore. What I can say is that we probably have interfaces between systems rather than any kind of deep integration. We do have a digital master plan taking us forward over the next 5 years, and in that there will be a portal which will surface just the information that people need for the context that they're working in, and hopefully that will help to build links between our systems and services. The last aspect of the strategy, connecting students, academics and ideas. Yeah, this was even more difficult than connecting the systems together. I like this quote from Goethe, thinking is easy, acting is difficult, and to put one's thought into action is the most difficult thing in the world. But also, Jason Norton, my colleague and friend, I like his email signature, the smallest of deeds always exceeds the grandest of intentions. So we kind of had a grand ambition there, but we haven't realised it yet, which is not to say that we won't. Early days. Which brings me on to part 3, which is our move towards a more connected learning environment, bringing us right up to the present. So it is 2016, and in the last couple of years we've had a change of guard at UCL. We've got a new provost. Well, he's I guess not so new now, he's been there for a couple of years. Michael Arthur, he came from Leeds. Vice Provost Anthony Smith, he's the Vice Provost for Education, he came from the School of Pharmacy. And Dilly Fung, who was at Exeter before, and she's our Head of Educational Development. And the three of them are just so strongly committed to education, and they are tremendous leaders, and they have developed a vision, a strategy, which really, an institutional strategy which really has education at the core. And Michael Arthur, his mantra is that education should have parity of esteem with research. It is equivalent in importance to the institution. Dilly Fung, her vision, which she came, oh God. This happened last night when I ran through it. Maybe it's telling me I'm going on too long. Right. It is this slide. I'm not going to show that slide again because that's the one I had problems with, which crashed my other Mac last night. So here we go. Okay, the connected curriculum, Dilly's brainchild, and what she presented when she came to interview. And at its core, and I hope you can read that, learning through research and inquiry. Every student will be doing this right the way through their programme. So, students will connect with staff and with the world-leading research of staff in the institution. Within every programme, for every student, it will be a through line of research activity, and that will start, week 1, day 1, and run all the way through till they graduate. Students will be expected to make connections across subjects and out into the wider world, so the interdisciplinary side. And they will be connecting their academic learning with workplace learning. And they will be required to produce outputs directed at an external audience, not just essays for the tutor or exams for the marker. And they will connect with each other across phases, which means between year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, and with alumni, which is lovely, and it's really hard to argue with that. So in our strategy, there's a sort of one-page infographic, and the elevator pitch to do with the connected curriculum is that all students will be learning through research, connecting with each other, with people, places and subjects beyond their courses in UCL. So it's all to do with connections. And there is then a requirement, it's written in the strategy, that we will develop a distinctive digital infrastructure to connect students with each other, with staff, and with the outside world to support networked, research-based and interdisciplinary education. And I wrote that. So now I've got to deliver it. And so what this means is that we are going to be augmenting the existing VLE by a set of communication, collaboration, and productivity tools to make a thing called the connected learning environment. So we've got this. What do we need to do to support it in terms of this digital infrastructure? Well, we need an infrastructure that will enable connections beyond modules. We need to allow networks to evolve and develop and grow and be supported. We need to allow recommendations, whether it's recommended content or recommended groups or recommended people to follow, so social media sort of feel. We need it to be open beyond the institution. We need students to be able to showcase their work, producing external facing outputs. And we need to give some control to students, and of course that's very difficult in a traditional VLE, which tends to be very much controlled by staff. So, the connected learning environment, this is what it looks like in my mind. You've got the VLE at the core, and then wrapping around that, we've got a new thing called UCL Together, which is a working title. And then wrapping around that again, we've got the student showcase space, student sites. Core VLE, I'm quite comfortable that we stay with Moodle for now, and it was interesting listening to Jenny yesterday talking about, maybe you need to do a sort of review every couple of years. Oh my goodness. I don't know, I guess I feel so locked in to Moodle. The idea of shifting the institution, if there's a sure way to cause panic in the ranks, then it's to talk about changing the VLE. And as far as I can see, there are some interesting alternatives. If Canvas looks really interesting, but I'm not sure that they offer that much that it's worth the pain of a migration. I think the VLE does the job that a VLE needs to do. What we need is something else around it. So we're developing a vision for a thing called UCL Together. And the term was coined by Vincent Tong, who's in Dilly's team, and he's the academic coordinator for the connected curriculum. So here we go, another quick video. If I can.
At times, our education seems like it's solely based on receiving information from our elders. This information sometimes feels like it's being dumped into our head as if we were empty shells. However, as we all know, academics do not constitute the entire body of our knowledge, and one of the other major components is expression, which comes from within. UCL is here to provide us with the necessary tools to allow us to express ourselves and identify our goals.
But, Bea, why is it so important for UCL to provide us with a place to express ourselves?
Well, Hannah, expression is the first step to finding our interests and passions, not only through speech and writing, but also other forms such as art and music. We are a student body built of unique individuals, and the convergence of all our ideas is the basis of innovation. Just as UCL has been doing, lectures provide us with incredible academic resources. We have the privilege of being taught by brilliant professors who can be considered pioneers in their respective fields.
To complement lectures, tutorials offer us the opportunity to develop our view on topics through dialogue. This exchange, in itself a form of expression, allows us to make connections between our personal experiences and the subject. We consider this opportunity to be so valuable that we suggest tutorials should be extended to 1.5 hours. The tutor should act as a chairman for student discussion and debate to facilitate the formulation and sharing of ideas. Tutorials act as a bridge between the vast land of academics and ourselves, tourists confronted with this unknown territory.
But we have identified a problem with this bridge. We all have a common fear of being subject to judgment. UCL needs a place where judgment does not exist and ideas can be dissociated from the individual.
But how do we do this?
We create a virtual space where everyone is anonymous. This virtual space allows ideas to blend freely.
On a personal level, this will allow connections between our passions and academics to become clear, and simply make us more certain about what we want. On a larger scale, this virtual space will increase the chances that ideas will collide and complement to create. A perfect example of this process is this project in itself.
We have created an idea for a website based on the concept that all ideas are shared on common ground and have infinite potential. The user logs into the website by using an alias. The main page will present the departments offered at UCL, which we baptized Idea Cloud. The user method is as follows. The user selects the bubbles of his or her choice by clicking and dragging them into the choice board. The bottom of the choice board will present a Create Storm option, which will blend the categories and lead to the next page. This next page will show all ideas relevant to the blend. The user picks and chooses from these ideas, creating new idea clouds and repeating the process at his will. At any point, the user can add his own contribution to that idea cloud he created. To keep the user's ideas oriented towards current events, a weekly question that everyone can relate to will be at the top of the home page.
Relevant to a wide range of fields, this type of question invites interdisciplinary action. How could this not be enriching?
It can't be. This website allows UCL students to expose themselves to the different thought processes, opinions, and perspectives of their peers. We hope these ideas will open the door to new possibilities at UCL.
Now, whether or not we can actually build an idea cloud, I'm not so sure. And actually, trying to distill and understand, pin down the kind of functional requirements for this UCL together thing is quite hard. So these, the bubbles are meant to signify the difficulty of pinning it down. The best way I can describe it is that it's a sort of academic social network. And we've worked on some mock-ups. The sorts of things I think it needs to have in it: recommendations of content, recommendations of people, news, a sort of ticker tape thing with what's going on, what new spaces have been set up, new people to follow, resources which have been added, what's trending. Needs some audience management so that you can control access to your group if you need to, or to your own stuff in there. It needs to have a social media feel with all the kind of liking and following and so on. We need to be able to tag it. We need to be able to manage information, so adding in metadata and so on. And so those are probably the basics. Possibly the idea generation or ideation type of functionality. Possibly things like leaderboards to show who are the most influential people, to vote things up, to give people that kind of kudos, to identify roles perhaps for people in a community. Possibly badges. Whatever, it needs to be more open than our current VLE. And it needs to be easy to use, fundamentally, otherwise people won't use it. It needs to be elegant, it needs to be customizable, it needs to have an educational feel, and people need to want to come to it. Now, the big risk, I think, is that we set something up and actually nobody comes. So what we do need is, and it's interesting, we've got a Office 365, the Microsoft suite of stuff, and there are groups in there, which I only discovered about last week, and it turns out that 800 groups have been set up in this space, mainly by students with all sorts of names. And it's really hard to work out what on earth's going on. But clearly there is an appetite for a space where they can set up groups and join up with each other. But a lot of these groups are probably unused, or there's only one person in them. So what we do need is to make sure that we have kind of custodians for every space and that we work and support them. So yeah, we've got a mock-up, but we don't have a clear idea. I don't think it exists, the sort of thing that we want. I don't think it exists off the shelf. So we need a platform, and we're going to have to go through some kind of a procurement exercise, and we'd also be open to working with a partner to try and develop it, and whether it's a startup or an established business, who knows. But we want to create something. We see this is a way that with the connected curriculum, with this great emphasis on connecting people in different roles and even with it beyond the institution, Moodle doesn't automatically lend itself to that. Moodle still serves a very important purpose for the institution, but we feel that we need something to go around it. The third component of the connected learning environment, beyond the VLE and beyond this UCL together, is the student sites side of things. And there, again, it's another working title, don't know what we'll end up calling it. We've been really inspired by what the University of Mary Washington over in the States have done with the domain of one's own. And I've heard a number of institutions talking about this now, and I think JISC are quite interested in this as well, where you provide every student with their own web domain, and they can call it what they like, and they get to take it with them when they go, and they can plug in different tools and services into it. And you can provide them with a very vanilla thing that they can customize themselves if they're very technically competent and confident, or you can provide lots of templates and wizards and stuff to help them. And it helps students to have a platform to reflect and to showcase their learning and also to develop their digital capabilities. Now, we've pitched this to the people who control the funds, and we didn't get so far, and it was quite an expensive project. So we're slightly scaling back our aspirations, and probably we're going to go with a blog of one's own, student blogs. At the moment, we have an institutional blogging service for departments and for groups, but not for individuals, and certainly not for individual students. So we're looking at our options for a blogging service. So those are the three components of the connected learning environment. As I say, we don't really know what it's going to look like, but we hope it's going to be beautiful. And by the way, we are going to be gold members of the Moodle User Association, so we're kind of maintaining our commitment to Moodle. I hope that's clear. We just want to do something additional around the edge. I realise I've overrun slightly, but I hope that wasn't too much of a problem, give you a chance to wake up. Happy to take questions if we have time.
Okay, folks, out straight away. We've somebody down the bottom. Right.
And if they're hard technical questions, then I'll pass them on to somebody else.
Catch.
Okay, good morning. Robin Wilkinson from the Royal Air Force. Absolutely love the model. We use something similar. We use a platform called Jive. Really interested.
Jive?
Jive.
Okay.
I'm happy to share it later. Really like the integration, really like the ideas. How are you protecting and risk managing from radicalisation?
From radicalisation?
Radicalisation.
Do you know, of all the questions I might have predicted, that's not one of them.
Sorry.
I may need to go away and have a think about that. Yeah, sorry, I absolutely hadn't thought about it.
That's waking you up first thing in the morning, really, questions like that. Anybody else?
Can I have an easier question than that, please?
Anything can be
one.
easier than that question. There we go.
Steve.
Hello, Fiona. Steve Bond from the LSE. The third part of your e-learning strategy is about improving integration between different systems, and some of those systems are things like SITs, which presumably your team doesn't control. How do you go about writing a strategy where you're reliant on other parts of the university to deliver that? Do you have to write it in conjunction with them, or you just write it and then try to
Well, we've got this big digital master plan. And so there's the education bit, which I've looked after. There's a research bit, there's an administration bit, and there's an infrastructure bit, and there's a digital transformation bit. And the digital transformation and the admin parts of that digital master plan all kind of overlap with the SITS area, the student information. And there are 3 domain leads. I'm the domain lead for education, and I have 2 equivalents. And we do work closely. But the point is that all of our projects, they're all run within our division. And that ensures a certain level of joined-upness. The business owner for SITS is in the registry. But the service owners and the service operations people in ITIL terms are in our division, and we are all in the same building, and it does mean that we do know what's going on, and we do cooperate and collaborate and talk to each other. So it seems not to be too much of a problem, but I'm not under any illusions that the move towards the UCL Connect, the portal, and the need to join things up is going to be a very big challenge.
Okay.
There's a couple over here. Go on, throw it.
Easy catch. I'm going back. First of all, just thank you for a really rich presentation that has given me an enormous number of ideas. But I'm going back to the discussion earlier and in some other sessions relating to, I suppose, learning analytics and analysing how e-learning environments are being used. And I just thought it might interest people that in the FE sector, there seems to be, I don't know, quite a bit of development in that. In particular, there's a person called Andrew Checkley at Croydon College who believes the Moodle database is an absolute goldmine. But he seems to have managed to set up a reporting infrastructure that automates reporting going to whoever needs it, academics, management, etc. And also for the online delivery side of things, to create an algorithm to track the time actually spent by learners on particular activities, which I think is also useful.
Is he plugged into the JISC learning analytics work? Because they've been doing a big project, haven't they?
Yes, I know. I don't know if he is.
And you say Andrew Checky?
Yes, okay. at Croydon College. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Ready?
Hello, thank you. Good morning. My name is John Ward. I'm from the UK Meteorological Office. I was very interested in your initial discussion around a blended approach to education and integrating the e-learning into the overall approach in with face-to-face. So I was just wondering if you had any more detail on how you were tackling that, how you were deciding, which learning method you were going to use and how you approached it.
Well, one of the things which we've got at the moment, because of the connected curriculum, programs and program leaders are having to rethink the way that they're doing things. And so we've developed this is based on some work that was done, I think, at the Dublin Institute of Technology called Viewpoints, and it's a curriculum design workshop. We've called it the ABC, Arena Blended Connected. The Arena bit is our staff development for education side. And anyway, we have a workshop approach to work with course teams who are wanting to overhaul a program or indeed a module. And it looks at different learning activities and then looks at what kind of, and the balance of different sorts of learning activities that you want to have in a program or in a module, and then at what kind of online things that you can do to support that. So, and I suspect if you were to Google UCL ABC, you'd find out more about it. We've got a video about it on our and certainly in our digital education blog at UCL, you can find out some more. So that was led by Clive Young and Natasha Perovich, and it's how we're addressing it kind of going forward. We have this Arena staff development program, and e-learning is getting increasingly sort of integrated into that, both to support the learners, but also as a kind of formal part of what we teach them. But we do rely a lot on the champions and on word of mouth and on peer pressure. People are going to always be much more influenced by the professor in the room next door than they are listening to somebody from the centre telling them that they should use technology. So in terms of sort of rolling it out and making a difference, we're very reliant on people to show the way locally. Does that answer?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have time for one more question. And somebody really far away.
Just thinking about the anonymous forum you had for discussion of ideas, where you separate the idea from the individual. One of the important parts of discussion is obviously debate, and a part of that is when someone asserts something, they have to back it up and they say, follow that out through. How do you encourage that if you've anonymized everything?
Well, actually, so the anonymity bit, which was in that digital story from, in fact, those are a pair of first-year anthropologists, Hannah and Bea. The anonymity bit, we're not really planning on putting into our connected learning environment, into UCL together. We may want to have some ability to do stuff anonymously, but that's not a major feature of it. And for the reasons that you suggest. Although I was heartened to hear yesterday that there is going to be the ability to have anonymous discussions in Moodle, because sometimes you do want to ask that stupid question and you really don't want your name attached to it. If you're asserting something and you have to back it up, then maybe anonymity isn't the way. But there is a place sometimes for being able to say something without having your name attached to it.
Thanks.
Okay, I know for one, I thoroughly enjoyed that presentation and realised that at DCU we've been reinventing a few wheels, which I've just noticed are already existing, so we'll definitely be in touch. But if I can just ask you all to show your appreciation for Fiona and her team. Thank you.